Alright, so my short-term goal is to time the video correctly so I don't just end in the middle of a sentence. It seems like I've been watching YouTube for a million years and still haven't figured out how to end this video correctly. So I have some pollution here, and we'll be able to deal with that in a couple turns. Um, for right now, I'm going to build something big. Eventually, I'm going to turn it into a tank. Some more money. See if I can find any lonely units all by themselves. Make the Mongols regret messing with me. Probably, what was it, 800 years ago. Not that I hold a grudge or anything. No. So now, not only have I built a intercontinental railroad or transcontinental railroad, I guess they kind of sort of mean the same thing. Inter would mean along multiple continents, and I guess that's not what it is. Aqueduct. So they're going to get bigger. They might need a temple next. The larger a city is, the more negative some of their population is going to be, so building a temple will help to reverse that. I did the opposite in this city. I built the temple first, and now I'm building the aqueduct. And it's just preventative. Something that I know is going to happen after a number of years of playing Civilization. Ooh, they are not defending their cities very well. I don't usually like to just randomly attack with a battleship when I'm not technically at war with a group. I just did. So you'll notice that I have a military unit, and I had him leave the city, and there are no upset people. And the reason for that is that I built women's suffrage. And what women's suffrage will do is it will allow less war-weariness. And I didn't quite get that at the time of when I was younger. Why would women's suffrage lead to a smaller amount of war-weariness? And I don't think that really is explained at all. But I can kind of explain the historical, why that makes historical sense. I mean, looking at World War II, that's when you had and the women's movement both before, which gave women the right to vote in the early 19th or 20th century, and then the later women's movement shortly thereafter. It was all about women able to do any of the jobs that men could do, and they were doing a majority of the work, factory work and man jobs, since the men were off fighting in Europe and in the Pacific. So it made sense that the women's movement would also allow for a little bit less war weariness, and that would make sense because women are now a part of the workforce. And while there definitely would be people upset that their sons and still it's sons at the time, not sons and daughters. I almost said sons and daughters. Their sons and daughters were off fighting, although there were daughters who were overseas helping in a variety of tasks in the war. It makes sense that the war-weariness would go away a little bit with the women's movement, because that's when women were allowed to do a lot of the things that previously they weren't. And that way, I guess it kind of makes sense. I mean, still, while World War II is the example I'm giving, World War II, we didn't see nearly the amount of protests for the war, although there were some. You have to do a lot of research to find it, but there were a few that said, especially before we went into the war. After Pearl Harbor, it's a different story because, we had our reason for now joining the war because we were attacked. But in the many years of stuff going on in Europe, and the Europeans basically begging us to join against Germany, there was a lot of protests about joining the war. So even though I can understand why there was the leap to create a sense of the women's movement would lead to a lack of war weariness, I guess. I'd still say there was war weariness. I can just understand where the developers of the game were trying to go. And I could have just waited for the ship to come over, but now it's for sure. Oh no! Oh no! I thought that area would have been rather well protected, and I was wrong. The good thing is they only had one unit over there, or else I would have lost a city. Mass production is going to give me the best defensive unit in the game. I think it's mass production, which is the mechanized infantry. So I'm going to go for that because not only am I struggling right now with the Greeks, out of all people, not that the Greeks weren't a strong civilization at any time, but they were not really my number one concern. Let's see if they built a city up here. I knew I shouldn't have done that. So we'll be starting to build a bunch of tanks soon. In fact, I should start building tanks right now. Bank, I think that was fine. Bank, I want you to build an armor. Niagara Falls, they built the ship. We'll have you build an armor. Quebec, you're building a temple, that's fine. Ottawa, you're building a university, that's fine. Toronto, Cathedral. I'm going to also pull away one of those to reduce the amount of pollution. Because of all of the more shields you produce, the more pollution you produce. And I currently don't have a way to reduce pollution other than stopping production of things. Great library. It's a good thing I checked in on this city. It needed some maintenance, needed some fixing. Montreal. Would that build a armor? Yeah. I'll do that after. Okay. So I'm building a handful of armor to go and knock around the Mongols in a little bit. Ooh. Athens was being attacked. number of... Oh, there's my first armor unit. Again, they wanted me to put some people there. One tax collector. That'll make some upset people. We don't like paying taxes. Who likes paying taxes? Where are you? Why are you all in my space now? I'm thinking there's a city up here where they're just dropping off their soldiers to fight me. Alright, we're doing really well. I could build a mine there to help the city. Where are you? Oh. Sure. A battleship just lost to a guy holding a spear. That's alright. It's a game. It's a game. That means that there must have been a ship right there that just unloaded those guys. So it seems that the AI is slowly turning the units so that the Greeks are my #1 nemesis. It was the Mongols at the beginning of, for most of this play actually, and now it looks like they're turning it to the Greeks just by who's in charge and who's in power. Where did that militia dude go? Alright, so I'm going to start to bring this guy over to Quebec, and by the time he gets there, I'll have him loading a bunch of different tanks. Oh my gosh, they're all over the place now. And I think civilization will do that. It will, once you start to focus on one civilization, there will be a different one that starts to become the thorn in your side. Which, I mean, that's what happened in history, right? One civilization would come to power, like the Greeks, and then eventually, after a little while, they lose their hold on dominating the world, and you have the Persians or Romans, and then you have a couple other groups after the Romans. The Romans fall apart, and then you have the Byzantines and the Arabs, and you know, one begets another. So that it does make sense historically that if one group is in charge, is giving you a tough time, then it'll be another group. Sure. What's up? Ramses II? I'm assuming this is Ramses II. It never says that, but Ramses I isn't nearly the leader in Egyptian history that Ramses II was. Ramses II is the first leader to create a peace treaty in history. He orders construction of a whole bunch of temples in the Valley of the Kings. He expands trade. He's if you want to list the pharaohs of Egypt, he's in the top 5 for sure on anybody's list. So we'll talk to you later. I made my goal.